They laughed when the old man ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. A 2-Michelin-star restaurant in Chicago. A tasting menu that ran $295 a person, and the man in the corner in the out-of-date brown suit ordered the $16 bowl of chicken and rice, the one item at the bottom of the card that nobody ever ordered, the one the regulars thought was a joke. The table beside him thought it was a joke too, and they made sure he heard them. He didn't argue. He didn't turn around. He folded his menu, set it down, and thanked the young server with a kindness that made the laughter feel, for just a second, like something to be ashamed of. And then, 4 minutes later, the kitchen door swung open, and the chef, the famous one, the one people waited 5 months to be cooked for, the one who did not come out for anyone, walked across his own dining room, stopped at the old man's table, and did the last thing anyone expected. He apologized. To the old man. Personally, and then he got down on one knee beside the table so he could look him in the eye. Why the most celebrated chef in Chicago knelt on his own floor for a stranger in a brown suit, and what that stranger had done for him 36 years earlier, is a story I have never been able to tell without stopping partway through. There is a restaurant in the West Loop of Chicago called Ember. And on a Tuesday in November, on a night that started with cruelty, it became the kind of place people tell their grandchildren about. Ember sits on a quiet block off Randolph Street, in a converted brick warehouse with no sign. Because when you are Ember, you do not need a sign. People who come to Ember know where it is. They have known for 5 months, because that is how far in advance the reservations go. Inside, it is all warm light and dark wood and the low, reverent hum of a room full of people who understand they are somewhere important. 40 seats, 1 seating a night. An open kitchen at the back where you can watch 14 cooks move in a silence so total it looks like a religious order. The tasting menu is $295 before wine, and the wine is not cheap, and nobody at Ember has ever once complained about the check. Every dish is a small miracle of technique. A single scallop that took 2 days to prepare. A broth clarified through a process that has a name most diners cannot pronounce. This is food as art. Food as status. Food is the clearest signal a person can send that they have arrived somewhere most people never will. And at the very bottom of the menu, below all of it, in small plain type, there is one line that has confused Ember's guests for 6 years. Chicken and rice, the way it should be. $16. That's all it says. $16, in a room where the bread service is more than that. The regulars have theories. The critics have written about it, the puzzle at the bottom of the menu. One of them called it the chef's little inside joke. In 6 years, almost no one has ever ordered it. It sits there, cheap and strange and unexplained, and the chef who put it there has never once told anyone what it means. His name is Daniel Vo. Everyone calls him Danny. He is 50 years old, and he is by any measure the food world uses at the top of it. 2 stars, a book, a show he turned down twice before agreeing to. He is famous for 2 things, the food and the fact that he almost never leaves the kitchen. He does not table hop. He does not court critics. He cooks, and he lets the food speak, and the food has never once needed his help. What almost no one at Ember knows, because Danny Vo does not talk about it, not in interviews, not in the book, not to the cooks who have worked beside him for years, is where he came from. Danny Vo came to Chicago at 6 years old on the last leg of a journey that had started in a boat. His family had fled Vietnam with nothing, and after 2 years in a camp they had landed in Uptown, on the north side, in a 4th-floor walk-up with 4 families sharing it. His father found work when there was work. His mother took in sewing, and there were stretches, long ones, in the winters, when there was not enough food in that apartment for the number of children in it, and Danny, the oldest, learned early to say he wasn't hungry so his sisters could eat. By the time he was 14, Danny Vo was a thin, quiet, watchful boy who had learned that the world did not have a place set for him. And every day after school, on his way to a job that didn't exist, he walked past a diner on Wilson Avenue with steam on the windows and a hand-painted sign that said Sales Kitchen. That diner is where this story actually begins. And the old man in the brown suit is the reason it was ever built. But first, the table that laughed. The man doing most of the laughing was named Julian Ashcroft, and he was, in the small and vicious world of Chicago dining, a person to be feared. Julian Ashcroft was 49 years old, and he was the most powerful food critic in the city, and he had the specific, honed cruelty of a man who has made a career out of deciding what other people's life's work is worth. A single Julian Ashcroft review could fill a restaurant for a year, or empty it for good. He knew it. He wore the knowing like cologne. He sat at his table at Ember that night, a table he had not waited 5 months for, because critics do not wait, holding court for 3 younger writers who laughed at everything he said, and he watched the room the way a hawk watches a field, looking for something small to catch. Here is the thing about Julian Ashcroft that the people who feared him did not know. Julian Ashcroft could not cook. He was the son of Vincent Ashcroft. The Vincent Ashcroft, the chef, the 4-star titan of a previous generation, a man whose name was in the culinary textbooks. And Julian had grown up in the back of his father's kitchens, wanting one thing on this earth, which was to be great the way his father was great. He had tried. God, he had tried. And he had been, at his very best, mediocre, a competent line cook with no gift. And worse, a father who could not hide his disappointment, who had once said, in front of the whole brigade, when Julian was 19 and had ruined a sauce, "Some people are born to make it. Some people are born to write about the people who make it. Figure out which one you are." Julian had figured out which one he was, and he had spent 30 years making the people who could do the thing he couldn't pay for the sentence his father had spoken over him. He could not create. So he had made himself the man who destroys. It was the only power a man like Julian could find, and he wielded it like a starving man wields a knife. So when the old man in the corner, the brown suit, the wrong shoes, the man who did not belong, opened his menu and ordered, in a quiet voice, the $16 chicken and rice, Julian Ashcroft saw exactly the small thing he had been hunting for all night. "Oh, that's marvelous," he said, loud enough, turning to his table. "Do you see this? A man comes to Ember, 5-month wait list, one of the finest kitchens in the country, and orders the chicken and rice. He said the words like they were dirty. The one dish on the menu a child could make. I've genuinely never seen it happen. It's like flying to Paris to eat at a vending machine." His table laughed. He was warming up now, and cruelty, for Julian, was a performance, and he had an audience. Sir, I have to ask, do you know where you are? Did you perhaps mean to go somewhere else? There's a very good Denny's about a mile from here." The laughter came again, louder. The old man's name was Salvatore Marchetti, and everyone who had ever loved him called him Sal, and it was his 84th birthday. He had not meant to come somewhere he didn't belong. His granddaughter Gina had done it, had saved up and booked the impossible reservation months in advance as a birthday gift, and then, 3 days before, had been called out of town for work and been unable to come, and had begged him to go anyway, alone, and not waste it. You spent your whole life feeding other people, Grandpa. Let somebody cook for you for once. So, Sal had put on the brown suit he had married Angela in, the one that no longer fit the way it had, and he had taken the train downtown, alone, on his birthday, to a restaurant he could never in 100 years have afforded, to let somebody cook for him for once. Angela had been gone 3 years now. The diner had been gone 20. Sal's kitchen on Wilson Avenue had closed in 2004 when the block was sold and the rent tripled overnight. And Sal, who had never in 40 years turned away a hungry person, who had a drawer full of unpaid tabs he'd stopped pretending he'd ever collect, had not had the savings to fight it. He had closed the doors, and he had gotten old, and he had buried his wife, and he had become, in the way that the people who spend their whole lives giving so often become, invisible. He had opened Ember's menu, and his eyes had gone straight past the scallops and the broths he didn't understand, down to the bottom, to the cheapest thing, the thing a man on a fixed income could order without shame. And then he had stopped breathing for a moment. Chicken and rice. The way it should be. Because that was his line. That was the exact thing he used to say. 40 years of saying it, ladling it into a bowl for whoever came in cold and hungry and short on money. Here you go, chicken and rice, the way it should be. Eat. He had said it 10,000 times. And here it was, printed at the bottom of the menu of the finest restaurant he had ever set foot in a city of 3 million people. And Sal Marchetti did not believe in coincidences, but he could not for the life of him understand what this one meant. So he ordered it. To see. His hands were shaking a little when he handed the menu back, and a man he had never met turned around and told him, in front of the whole room, that he should be at a Denny's. Sal Marchetti had spent 40 years absorbing every kind of hardship a man can absorb, and he had learned a long time ago that you do not give cruelty the fight it is looking for. So he did not answer Julian Ashcroft. He just nodded once, the way a tired man nods, and he looked down at the tablecloth, and he waited for it to pass, the way you wait for weather. But the young server did not laugh. Her name was Nadia, and she was 19 years old, and she worked 4 nights a week at Ember and took classes at Truman College in the mornings. And she was sending most of what she made to her mother in another state. She had taken Sal's order. She had seen his hands shake. She had heard the whole thing, and something in her chest was on fire. She did not say anything to Julian. You do not. Not at Ember. Not to a man who can end the restaurant with a paragraph. But she walked back to the kitchen with the ticket, and instead of clipping it to the rail with the others, she carried it to the pass, to the sous chef, Marco. Then she said, quietly, Table 12 ordered the chicken and rice. And Ashcroft's giving him hell for it. The old guy's alone. It's not okay out there, chef. Marco looked at the ticket. Chicken and rice, the way it should be. T12. In 6 years, Marco had seen that ticket come through maybe a dozen times, and every single time there was a standing instruction in that kitchen, an unbreakable one. The only rule Danny Vo had ever given that had nothing to do with food. If someone orders the chicken and rice, you tell me. No matter what I'm doing. You tell me. Marco walked it back to where Danny was working the fish station, and he set it on the steel beside him, and he said, Chef, the chicken and rice. Danny Vo stopped moving. He looked at the ticket for a long moment. Then he wiped his hands on his apron, slowly, and he said, Who ordered it? Table 12. Older gentleman. Alone, Marco hesitated. Nadia says Ashcroft's been working him over about it. Pretty loud. And Danny Vo, who did not leave the kitchen, who did not table hop, who had built an entire reputation on letting the food speak so he never had to, took off his apron. "Plate it," he said. "The real way. I'm bringing it out myself." He made it with his own hands. Not the $16 version, the real one. The one that isn't on any menu. The one he had made 1,000 times as a boy and could make in his sleep. And when it was done, he carried the bowl out through the swinging door and across his own dining room, in front of 40 of the most important diners in Chicago, straight toward the old man in the brown suit. He was 10 feet away when he saw the face. And Daniel Vo, 2 Michelin stars, top of the entire world, stopped walking, and the bowl in his hands began to tremble. "Sal," he said. The old man looked up. He saw a chef, a stranger, a famous stranger in whites, holding a bowl, and for 1 second there was nothing on his face but confusion. And then the chef said it again, and his voice cracked all the way through, and 40 years fell off of it. "Sal, it's me. It's Danny, little Danny, from Wilson Avenue." Sal Marchetti's mouth opened. His eyes moved over the face in front of him, searching it, and you could watch the recognition arrive. The thin, watchful, hungry boy who used to stand at his window in the winter, surfacing out of this famous stranger like a photograph developing. "Danny," he whispered. "Little Danny. The boy from. You were so thin. You were." His hand came up to his mouth. "I gave you the job. Washing dishes. You were 14. I gave you gave me everything." Danny set the bowl down on the table because he could no longer trust his hands to hold it. And then, in front of the entire room, in front of Julian Ashcroft, the most celebrated chef in the city got down on one knee beside a stranger's table, so that he was eye to eye with an 84-year-old man in a brown suit, and he told the whole room the thing he had never told anyone. "When I was 14 years old," Danny said, not to sail now, but out, to the room, in a voice that did not rise but that everyone could hear, "I hadn't eaten a full meal in 11 days. My family had 4 kids, and not enough for 4 kids, and I was the oldest, so I was the one who went without. And I used to walk past a diner on Wilson Avenue on my way to a job I'd made up, because I was too proud to go home and watch my sisters eat what there wasn't enough of." The room was dead silent. Even Julian Ashcroft had gone still. And one day this man, Danny put his hand on Sal's shoulder, came out onto the sidewalk, in the cold, and he didn't ask me if I was hungry, because he knew I'd say no. He just said, "I made too much chicken and rice again. I do it every day. I don't know what's wrong with me. You'd be doing me a favor." And he sat me down, and he fed me. And the next day he did it again, and the day after that. Danny's voice was breaking now, and he let it. He fed me every day for 4 years. He gave me a job so I could keep my dignity. He taught me to cook everything. Everything I know started in his kitchen. He told me I had a gift when not one other person on this earth had ever told me I had anything. He never once let me pay him back. He never once let me thank him. He just said, "You'll do it for somebody else someday." That's the whole deal. Danny looked up at the room, and his eyes found Julian Ashcroft's table, and he did not raise his voice, and he asked one question. "You wanted to know why a man would come to Ember and order the chicken and rice." He said it quietly. "That dish is the reason Ember exists. That dish is the reason I exist. Every single thing on that menu, every plate you've eaten tonight, every star on that door, it all came out of one bowl of chicken and rice that a poor man gave a starving kid for free 40 years ago and never asked for anything back." He turned back to Sal. "You didn't come to the wrong restaurant, Sal." He was smiling now, through all of it. You came to the only one in the world that's yours. Danny brought him into the kitchen. He walked Sal Marchetti through the swinging door into the heart of Ember, and 14 cooks, who had never once seen their chef cry, stood at their stations and watched him introduce them, one by one, to an old man in a brown suit. This is the man. This is Sal. Everything you've learned here, he taught me first. And then Danny sat Sal down on a stool at the pass in the warmest corner of the kitchen, and he cooked for him. Not the tasting menu, the real chicken and rice, the way Sal had taught him 36 years before. And while it cooked, the two of them talked, in the low voices of people catching up on the decades they'd lost. Danny told him the truth of the hungry years, the whole truth, the part he'd left out on the floor, how close he'd come to giving up, how many nights he'd wondered if he was worth the food he ate, and how the only thing that had ever contradicted that voice was a fat, loud, kind man on Wilson Avenue who acted like feeding him was a favor Danny was doing him. And Sal told Danny his truth too, the diner closing in 2004, the tabs he never collected, Angela's long illness and the way it emptied what little he had, the 3 years alone since. And the thing he said quietest of all, the thing that broke Danny more than anything else, I used to wonder, sometimes, if any of it mattered. All those years, all those people I fed. Nobody remembers a diner. I thought I'd just disappear like it never happened. Danny put down the spoon. You fed 100 hungry kids on that block, Sal. Maybe 1,000, over 40 years. You have no idea where any of us ended up. He gestured out at the kitchen, the restaurant, the whole improbable life. This is one. This is what one of us did with what you gave him. Imagine the rest. You didn't disappear. You're standing in the middle of it. He did not forget about Julian Ashcroft. But he did not do to Julian what Julian had spent 30 years doing to people. That's the part that separates this from a simpler story. Before Sal left that night, and he left with a card Danny called for him, and a box of food and a promise, Danny went back out to the floor, and he stopped at Julian Ashcroft's table. The 3 younger writers braced. Everyone expected the knife. Danny didn't reach for it. He looked at Julian for a moment, and what he said gently, I read your father's book when I was 17. Sal gave it to me. It taught me how to break down a whole fish. He paused. I'm sorry you grew up in those kitchens and came out of them believing the only thing you were good for was tearing other people down. That's not what your father's food was about. I don't think it's what you're about either, underneath it. There's still time to be something better than the meanest thing you ever heard about yourself. And then he walked away, and he left Julian Ashcroft sitting there with something on his face that none of his companions had ever seen. The look of a man who has just been seen all the way to the bottom, and, against every expectation, not despised for what was found there. Here is what happened after. Sal Marchetti never ate alone again. Danny gave him a standing reservation. Every Sunday, the best table in the house, the one by the window, and Sal came, in the brown suit, every single week. And the whole staff of Ember came to know him, and the regulars who had once laughed learned his name and asked for his stories. Danny took the $16 chicken and rice off the bottom of the menu and gave it a name. He called it Sal's. He put a single line beneath it, the dish that built this place. Ask us why. And people asked, and the servers told them, and Sal's became the most ordered dish at a 2 Michelin star restaurant in America. A $16 bowl of chicken and rice, outselling the scallop that took 2 days. Because people, it turns out, are starving for something the tasting menu can't give them. Sal lived 2 more years. Good ones. He was there in the brown suit at the window table for 2 more birthdays. When he passed in his sleep peacefully at 86, Danny closed Ember for the first time in its history, and he served chicken and rice for free to anyone who came all day in Sal's memory. 400 people came. Most of them had never met Sal Marchetti. They came because they had heard the story, and the story had done to them what it does to everyone. The menu line reads differently now. It says, Sal's. For a man who fed the hungry and asked for nothing. Order it. That's how we keep him here. Nadia, the 19-year-old server who carried the ticket back and refused to laugh, Danny noticed her that night. And he did what Sal had done for him. He found out she wanted to cook. He moved her into the kitchen. He paid for her to finish at Truman and then for culinary school on top of it. She is 24 now, and she runs her own station at Ember. And Danny says, to anyone who'll listen, that she has the thing you cannot teach, the same thing Sal saw in a starving boy on Wilson Avenue. The deal, the way Danny explains it to her, is the same deal it has always been. You'll do it for somebody else someday. And Julian Ashcroft. Nobody expected anything of Julian Ashcroft. But 6 months after that night, he published a piece, not a review, an essay, about his father and the kitchens he grew up in, and the sentence that had been spoken over him at 19, and what it had turned him into. He wrote that he had spent 30 years mistaking cruelty for standards. He did not entirely stop being difficult. People do not entirely change. But he never wrote another review designed to destroy a person for sport. And more than one young chef in Chicago has quietly said that the Julian Ashcroft of the last few years is a man who seems, finally, to be rooting for them. A door, opened even a crack, lets in more light than you'd think. Danny Vo still cooks. Ember still has no sign. And once a month on a Monday when the restaurant is dark, Danny and his cooks make chicken and rice. The real way. Sal's way, and they take it out to the shelters on the north side, near Wilson Avenue. And they feed whoever is hungry, and they act like it's a favor the hungry are doing them. That's the part I keep coming back to. I've told this story a lot of times, and everybody wants to talk about the reveal, the chef walking out, kneeling down, the critic's face, the beautiful moment when the old man in the brown suit turns out to matter more than everyone in the room, combined. But that's not the part that stays with me. The part that stays with me is Sal, on that stool in the kitchen, saying the quietest thing in the whole story. I used to wonder if any of it mattered. I thought I'd just disappear. Because Sal Marchetti fed a hungry child every day for 4 years, and never once did it thinking it would come back to him. That wasn't the deal. He said so himself. You'll do it for somebody else someday. The whole point was that it went forward, not back. He gave that food away into the dark, expecting nothing. And then he got old, and he buried his wife. And he sat alone on his 84th birthday, genuinely believing that a lifetime of feeding the hungry had added up to nothing at all. He was wrong. He was so completely wrong that the evidence had 2 Michelin stars and no sign on the door. But he had no way of knowing that. And here's the thing I can't put down. The good he did was exactly as real on the night he thought it meant nothing as it was on the night he found out it meant everything. The chicken and rice fed that boy whether or not the boy ever grew up to build Ember. The kindness counted before the payoff. It would have counted if the payoff never came at all. Most of the good that gets done in this world gets done by people who never find out it mattered. Sal just happened to find out. The rest of them, the ones who fed somebody and never learned where it went, it counted for them too. Every bit of it. So here's what I'll leave you with. Somewhere out there is a person who did something quiet and kind for you a long time ago, and gave it away into the dark, and has no idea it landed. No idea it mattered. Maybe they're wondering, right now, tonight, if any of it ever added up to anything. You could tell them. While there's still time to tell them. I think that's the whole point. This story is a work of fiction. Sal Marchetti, Danny Vo, Julian Ashcroft, Nadia, the Ember Restaurant, and every place and event in it were created for this narration. Any resemblance to real people or businesses is coincidental. If someone once fed you, really fed you, when you had nothing and never asked for anything back, tell me about them in the comments. Say their name. Give them the thanks they never waited around for. And if there's a person in your life who did something quiet and good a long time ago and might be wondering tonight whether it mattered, send them this. Let it be the thing that tells them it did. If you want more stories told this way, slowly and with respect for everyone in them, subscribe, and I'll have the next one ready for you. Take care of each other. I'll see you in the next one.